Well, we continue our coverage of the AGOA summit, which is taking place here in Nasrec in Johannesburg. It is the final day of the summit, and now we're going to be in conversation with Judge Devermont, who is a Senior Director for African Affairs at the U.S. National Security Council, to speak also about issues relating to security, which is quite important when we speak about trade. Judd, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. It's good afternoon, actually, man.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yep. Let's quickly start with some of the concerns, perhaps, that the U.S. has when it comes to security on the continent, as well as issues relating to conflict and the impact that that has on trade.
Yeah, there's a number of really concerning developments, primarily in West Africa, in the Sahel, with growing extremism, conflicts in Sudan, conflicts in Ethiopia, and of course some extremist threats in northern Mozambique. And so unfortunately this often has a stereotypical image that it presents to the American public, which is making distinctions not only between countries but between markets. So one of our jobs here together with the South Africans and all of our delegations is to be very specific about the real opportunities on the continent, be very clear about where we see challenges with security, but encourage the American private sector to know that Africa is open for business and there are real opportunities, and the U.S. government, through our legislation, like the African Growth and Opportunity Act, is a way to have really powerful two-way trade that benefits Americans and Africans.
Yeah. What specifically is it that you have a concern on when it comes to what's happening in West Africa?
Well, in West Africa, whether we're talking about Mali or Burkina or parts of Niger, extremist groups associated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS have taken over large swaths of territory. For example, in Burkina Faso, it's about 60% of the country. And as this threat continues to grow, it starts to threaten the littoral countries in West Africa, particularly some of the biggest markets like Ghana, Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire. And so we're working very closely with African partners, with others, so that we can try to roll back some of this extremist threat, which of course, if there's insecurity in a country, you're not going to be able to have the kind of trade relationships that you want.
Yeah. Is there concern at all about mercenaries, and also mercenaries coming from South Africa?
Well, there's a general concern about mercenaries, particularly Russian ones. So, for example, in Mali, the Wagner group, which was previously controlled by Prigozhin, has led to even greater casualties. In fact, since December 2021, when the Wagner group showed up in Mali, there's been a 270% increase in civilian casualties. So the mercenaries come, they make the situation worse, they create infighting, civilian casualties, and again, to this question that we have is, we're about promoting trade and investment in Africa, and the insecurity is an impediment to that.
Yeah. One of the congressmen in the U.S. has actually written a letter now to to the Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, and the question around Lady R is back on the agenda again. Has the U.S. does the U.S. feel that you've dealt with this issue sufficiently?
Look, we appreciate the concerns of our Congress. They're an important member, part of our process. We also appreciate the seriousness in which the South African government conducted the inquiry into the Lady R, and we have a number of things that we need to do together beyond that issue, particularly trade investment, as we've been talking about, but our strong, long-standing commitment to working together on health, and our increasing security cooperation in the rest of the region. So, for our government, we're focusing on the next chapter and the things that we need to do together.
Yeah, but it almost seems that the congressmen themselves are not convinced that there wasn't any evidence. It's almost like they're convinced that there is actual evidence. Does the U.S. have any evidence?
Well, listen, I would encourage...
Outside of the South Africa has its own investigation, of course, that said that there was no evidence that we supplied arms to Russia, but any evidence from the Security Council side?
So one of the things that I think has been great about the South African-U.S. relationship is that South Africans are such a sophisticated partner and understand our system. So, for example, when Minister Patel came to the United States, he engaged with Congress members. So my encouragement is that Congress is a separate branch of government. We certainly engage them. We explain our position on South Africa. We underscore why we think this relationship is critical and moving forward. But I think the more that South Africa can talk directly to our Congress about the issues that they have, I think that's the best way forward.
So does it mean no evidence?
It means that for us, we have worked very closely with the South African governments. We raised our concerns privately and publicly. The investigation we thought was done with seriousness, and we're moving on.
So no evidence?
I didn't say, the question here is what is important in our relationship, and that is trade investment, security, and a South African commitment to non-alignment, which the South African government has reassured us that is their goal. You have the executive summary of the inquiry. I think that stands for itself. Okay,
just a quick one is on the Private Securities Amendment Bill in South Africa. There was an issue that was raised during the tenure of former President Obama as well, where South Africa was saying that 51% of security companies must be owned by South Africans, and there was protest against that by the US administration as well. And now we've seen that Tyco, for instance, that used to own ADT, has pulled out. Is that still a concern for the US?
I will tell you that is not something that has been at the top of my agenda. So it is. I'm not saying that it's not an issue. I'm saying that on the strategic issues that I work on day in, day out, I have not been discussing that issue.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. That is Judd Devermont, who is a Senior Director for African Affairs at the US National Security Council.